Martial arts stratagem plus detective investigation plus strong alliance plus funny undercover, the law-abiding court is melancholic, and the strong beam sings joyfully every night. Riding horses and mules at the expense of others, enduring hunger with integrity and fairness. Repairing bridges and roads leads to blindness, and there are many murders and fires. I asked the Buddha in the western sky, and the Buddha said there's no way to ask me. What is the Jianghu? Where there are people, it is the rivers and lakes. There is a neighborhood in the world called Muxiang neighborhood. The master of the workshop is mysterious, and no one knows his past. An ancient curse passed down from generation to generation, a suffering person recognized by prophecy. The legendary mysterious ancient building suddenly appeared in the world, and the rumored thief who had died for many years unexpectedly appeared at the feet of the emperor. The palace was frequently robbed late at night, the palace maid disappeared without reason, and the richest man in Jiangnan died mysteriously. Who did it happen to be? Chapter 1. If Willow Catkins soar up 90,000 miles in the wind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the late Northern Dynasty, eunuchs were in power, the court was corrupt, high-ranking officials in temples engaged in personal gain and fraud, and the martial arts were rampant in the martial arts world. Various ghosts, snakes, and gods roamed the world. The rise and fall of dynasties, the suffering of the people, and the endless occurrence of strange, unjust, and mysterious cases throughout the world. The inspectorate shoulders the responsibility of supervising the world and is a crucial part of criminal investigation, with significant responsibilities. Jiang Maxiong, the chief inspector of the imperial censorate, is known as the divine and iron judge for his integrity, repeatedly solving strange cases and seeking justice for the people. Mo Xiongong was upright and righteous, with great achievements in his youth. He made many good friends and made good friends. Although he came from an official position and had low power, he was married to the daughter of the Grand Master of the East Pavilion in his youth. In his middle age, he had a daughter and was named Han Yen. At the age of 3, Han Yen had already practiced martial arts and literature, and at the age of 5, he had practiced Shaolin Wudang orthodox internal skills. He was also taught martial arts by Yu Diansang, a stranger in the martial arts world known as the White Feather Divine Sword. Thanks to his father's good and kind-hearted connections, he has gained some knowledge from various sects and schools, and can be said to have knowledge of 3 religions and 9 streams, as well as the strengths of 100 schools of thought. At the age of just over 10, Han Yen was already able to fly over eaves and walls, breaking branches into swords. Jiang's house. Early in the morning, the front yard of the Jiang family was quiet, while the sound of ping-pong could be heard from the backyard. In the backyard, 2 people, one tall and one short, were engaged in a martial arts competition. They came and went, flowing smoothly and cleanly, using bright and real swords. The tall one is a middle-aged man, and the short one is a little girl around 10 years old. With amazed watery eyes and cherry lips, she looks like a beautiful embryo. She is beautiful and lovely, but when she dances with her sword, she is sharp and fierce, with a wide opening in closing. The 2 of them were fighting fiercely. There was another person standing beside her, who was also a young girl with a look that could not compare to the one in the martial arts competition, only considered delicate. But her eyes were particularly lively, their eyeballs moving with the sword's shadow, focused and profound. Soon, the corner of her mouth slightly curled up, reserved and confident. After she smiled, the evenly matched competition changed. The man's sword was seized by the girl, and he released it. At the same time, he was also slapped and stepped back 2 steps. The girl drew her sword and didn't care whether the man was injured or not. She shrugged her nose and said, "Uncle San, I'm willing to give up and buy me a sugar man." The man rubbed the area where he was hit and then made a fist and foot gesture, "Lose. It's early. Look at the punches." The girl was about to fight again when suddenly a thick voice came from her, "Losing means losing, playing tricks is not acceptable." The man and girl's expressions lit up, and they smiled as they looked at the newcomer, bowing in unison and calling out, "Master." Jiang Maxiong was covered in dust and came to the backyard without changing his official uniform, followed by a woman and a girl. The woman is beautiful, with a graceful posture and graceful gait, but her face is not very attractive. The girl hugged her on the side, very affectionate. Judging from her face, she had a beautiful appearance at a young age, with picturesque features. Women and girls are all good-looking, while Jiang Maxiong, who leads the way, has a leopard head and eyes, a swallowing chin and curly beard, a square face and a broad mouth, and is not angry but majestic. He was about 7 feet long, with a tiger-like body and a wolf-like waist. He was burly and majestic, dressed in a hunting suit with a majestic aura. He walked with a gentle breeze and landed silently. In an instant, he arrived in front of him, and under the shadow, the person in front of him was pitifully small. He was born rough, but his face was smiling with a hint of kindness and generosity. "Zhaoyuner, I haven't seen you for a month, and my martial arts skills have improved again. Third, you sugar person can't escape." Upon hearing this, Qiuyun frowned with joy and snorted at the person next to him who called out, "Third uncle." He was cute and proud, making He-Wu and Jiang Maxiong burst into laughter. "Dad!" The delicate girl who had been quiet just now walked over and called out to Jiang Maxiong, her nose moving almost imperceptibly. Jiang Maxiong lowered his eyes and looked at his daughter, who was not even close to his chest. Seeing her bright and lively eyes, and her whole body as heavy as a lake, he tilted the corner of his mouth. His powerful hands quickly waved towards Jiang Hanyan and began to move. "Oh my!" Qiuyun exclaimed in surprise and was carried away by He-Wu, who was quick-witted. At this moment, Jiang and his daughter had already engaged in 3 or 5 moves, but quickly and suddenly, the woman frowned but did not stop them. The others were already staring blankly. Jiang Maxiong was tall, and Jiang Hanyan lit up one in front of him. However, after dozens of moves, Jiang Maxiong was unable to capture her. At a young age, his martial arts were already impressive. The father and daughter split 3 fists and 5 palms in a row, and Jiang Maxiong used a move called splitting the air palm to shatter a 100-pound stone lock in the courtyard. Jiang Hanyan knew she was no match for her father's deep internal strength. She leaped forward and easily crossed the courtyard wall, which was more than 10 feet high. Jiang Maxiong refused to be outdone and chased after her. The father and daughter both climbed over the wall in the blink of an eye and disappeared into the backyard of the Jiang family. The remaining 2 monks were puzzled and looked at each other. Not long after, I suddenly heard horses barking from the stable behind the wall, and in an instant, the sound of hooves clattering away. The woman looked at the broken stones and empty yard and suddenly shouted, "Okay, it's their father and daughter's way again." Her good demeanor disappeared, scaring Qiuyun and Xie San's bodies. The girl next to her opened her mouth and spoke in a gentle and pleasant voice, "Madam, I made ice mung bean soup to calm down my breath." The woman's chest heaved a few times before returning to normal. She held the girl's hand and sighed, "It's still Lear who is considerate. Those 2 will make me angry. Let's go, have some soup." Yuli smiled and helped the woman leave, leaving Qiuyun and Xie with big and small eyes. Finally, she honestly picked up the yard. Speaking of Jiang and his daughter. 1 person, 1 ride, had already left the moat and headed towards the outskirts. Kuai Ma Ju Chen, who had already left the town in a short period of time, quickly arrived at a grassland where the green grass was boundless, and the 2 of them were chasing passionately. Jiang Maxiong is burly, and his horse is also tall, making him a rare BMW horse. Jiang Maxiong's pursuit of criminals and pursuit of thieves cannot be separated from his contribution. Looking at the backward Jiang Hanyan, he is not very young, but his equestrian skills are also very skilled. "Dad, it's unfair. It's impossible for a typical horse to run past your lightning." Jiang Hanyan whipped the horse, but couldn't catch up with his father. Jiang Maxiong looked back and chuckled, there's not so much fairness in the world. If you want to win, you have to find a way. As soon as the words fell, the horse behind let out a long cry. Jiang Hanyan stepped on the horse's head, leaped forward, and landed steadily behind Jiang Maxiong. Lightning was startled, and with a flick of his front hooves, Jiang Maxiong grabbed his daughter's hand from his waist with his right hand and pulled hard with his left hand to stabilize the lightning. Lightning continued to run forward with the father and daughter. Jiang Maxiong felt his daughter gripping her waist tightly, sitting steadily and laughing heartily. Good girl. With hard work, courage, and a fatherly demeanor. Jiang Hanyan smiled but remained silent, allowing her father to ride her horse and gallop on the grassland, with the wind blowing wildly. Dad, I want a galloping horse like Lightning, and I want to name it Jingfan. The wind is fast and the sail is raised in the strong wind. I want to be the one who rides the wind. Okay, Dad made it. The father and daughter rode horses in the wind, the grass was very green, and the sky was very blue. After noon, the stream murmured, and Lightning paced and grazed by the river. Jiang and his daughter crawled into the jungle, a mountain without a path, and they were forced to climb it, covered in dead branches and leaves. The two of them took off the branches and leaves between their clothes and hair, looking at each other and laughing at each other's embarrassment. Dad, if Mom sees us now, she'll have to scold us again. Jiang Maxiong's face was tiger-like, from a woman's perspective. Dad, only when Mom is not around can you show off your authority. She exposed Jiang Maxiong's pretense of grandeur and walked to the edge of the mountaintop cliff. She looked up and saw that the sky was high and the water was long. I haven't given your father any face, I've really spoiled you. Jiang Maxiong walked over to his daughter and looked at them together. Jiang Hanyan didn't look at her father and chuckled lightly, Dad, you get used to me so that I can save you from water and fire under my mother's nose. Jiang Maxiong raised his eyebrows and said, Oh. How do you say this? You have been out on business for over a month, and when your mother left this morning, you haven't come back yet. However, you came with her in the backyard and didn't change your official uniform. According to your temperament, when you return to Beijing, you must immediately go to the Imperial Censorate to report your work. According to the schedule, when you came back at night, you immediately went to the Imperial Censorate, and when you returned home in the morning, you happened to meet your mother. These were all normal things, but as soon as you got home, you came directly to the backyard and interrupted the sparring between Uncle San and Chiu Yun. It seems like you were holding grudges for Chiu Yun, but in fact. Actually, what's going on? Jiang Hanyan's eyes curved as she looked at her father with malice. Dad, my mother's face wasn't as black as usual at that time. Tell me, why did you provoke my mother? Jiang Maxiong chuckled and said, You're so smart, take a guess. Jiang Hanyan's beautiful eyes turned and she smiled confidently, This won't stump me. You fought with me and suppressed me everywhere, but the 3 fists were different. The 3 palms were weak, all on your left hand. It must be that you got injured when you went out this time and were caught by your mother. I have a weakness when punching, can't I just let you down? It's all for your left hand. Just now, the lightning bolt raised my front hooves, and my left arm is still healthy. Do you have any evidence that I was injured? Dad, I didn't say you injured your left hand either. If you want evidence, isn't the evidence right around your waist? Jiang Maxiong was dressed in a constable uniform, with a dark leather armor around his waist. At first glance, there was nothing unusual, but upon closer inspection, the color of the armor on the left was noticeably darker than that on the right. At this moment, Jiang Hanyan also raised her left hand, which had a red mark on it. Dad, the evidence is conclusive. You have taught me before, but without solid evidence, we cannot make hasty conclusions. Wow, I thought you were afraid of falling off lightning before grabbing my waist hard. I didn't expect you to hit such a heavy hand just to confirm your guess. Jiang Maxiong raised his arm and fell towards Jiang Hanyan. Jiang Hanyan didn't hide either, letting her father's thick and sturdy hands hold her in his arms. Jiang Maxiong asked, "Your mother's temper can turn black even if it's a small matter. When did you realize that I made your mother unhappy because I was injured?" "As soon as I approached you, I smelled the scent of our family's aphrodisiac. Although it wasn't strong, I could smell it all. Can't my mother still smell it through her nose?" "Dad, I know my father is like a daughter. You're afraid my mother might argue with you again, so let's borrow a few of us to distract her attention." "As a daughter, I can't help." "Ha, you're really Dad's good daughter," Jiang Maxiong smiled. He was a burly man, leaning against his daughter, swaying and swaying with her, gently shaking for a while. On the edge of the cliff, one tall and the other small, the father and daughter leaned against each other without moving. His hand, resting on his daughter's thin shoulder, rhythmically patted. "Dad, is it very dangerous to go out this time? Does the wound hurt?" "I'm used to it. Being a constable is a profession that eats wind and rain, wears dust, carries grievances, and has to hang a sharp blade on its head. In the wind and rain, it carries justice in the world. Look at the smoke, the sky is not blue, high is not high, wide is not wide. Well, it's very blue, very high, very wide. The sky is clear and bright, my father's ambition is like this blue sky. I am Mo Xiong, and you are Han Yen. Blue sky, Han Yen, tiger father has no dog daughter." Jiang Hanyan nestled in her father's arms, capturing the scent of his father, the smell of wind, rain, and dust, as well as the smell of medicine and blood. She murmured to herself, "The blue sky and cold smoke make a tiger father without a dog daughter. The blue sky and white clouds are reflected in those bright and divine eyes. Dad, tell me about this case too." Chapter 2. Borrowing a few songs from Luo Meifan, 7 strings listening quietly to the cold pine wind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Time flies. At the age of 15, Han Yen entrusted his father to be sent to the Qingshui Yamen as a female jailer. At the age of 18, she was recognized by the county Yamen master as a female catcher with a sword. At 20, she entered the detention room of the sentencing prosecutor's office, and at 20.5, she was promoted to the capital procuratorate Qianpiawan, Muxiangfang. Qianpiao Garden is mostly surrounded by flower streets and willow alleys, while Muxiangfang is the largest brothel in Qianpiao Garden. In the middle of the night, the building was bustling with many high-ranking officials, businessmen, and tycoons lingering here. The open door vaguely reveals the lights, wine, and greenery inside, and one can hear extravagant words and lewd language. The building is bustling inside, the outside is deserted, and the streets and alleys are empty. The gatekeeper who passed by knocked the bangs 3 times and shouted, "At the 3rd watch of the hour, everything is safe and sound." The cold wind made him shiver, and he glanced at the restless Muxiangfang, shook his head, and continued to report the time elsewhere. The imposing gate was wide and high, and a girl in thin clothes helped a man in brocade out of the door. The man's footsteps were floating, hugging the slender woman and hanging on her, disrupting her clothes, and the spring light suddenly burst out. She accompanied with a smile and stumbled. The woman went out and saw nothing outside. She forced a smile and asked, "Mr. Chang, why didn't anyone come to pick you up today?" No, I can go back on my own. Tell Mr. Liu that I will definitely have Xuanhe accompany me next time." He released the woman and stomped down 3 levels of stairs. The woman quickly stepped forward and helped him. "Mr. Chang, why don't we send someone to take you back?" She was patient, but in fact, her arms were so cold that they gave way to small bumps. He waved his hand and said, "No need, sir. I have to walk on my own today and go back. Whoever follows me, I'm in a hurry with whoever." He walked slowly and left. The girl stood anxiously in place for a while before letting out a sigh before turning around and entering the room. The girl went up to the second floor when she returned. It was very dark upstairs, with dim lights and shadows, intoxicating and alluring. The corner of the corridor was even darker, and when she turned around, she met someone who happened to be standing in the dark, with an indistinct appearance, which startled her. However, soon her expression became respectful. In the empty and dim alley, a figure lay in the middle, with hands and bodies twisted strangely. Reaching out in mid-air, shriveled, grabbing outwards. Derui's blood seemed to be frozen all over his body, and behind him, besides the wind, there seemed to be someone's breath blowing in the back of his head. He stood up with sweat and hair, slowly turning his head. Ghosts. Help. Muxiangfang. Early in the morning, the girls in Muxiangfang haven't even gotten up yet. A team of officials from the government office have already rushed into Muxiangfang. Someone, call everyone out and ask questions one by one, the leader shouted. Mr. Shao, what's so angry about? A voice came from upstairs. Shao Jin saw a woman in splendid attire descending from upstairs. Dressed in red and yellow, magnificent but not glamorous, with a graceful figure and graceful demeanor, but covered in a golden mask. The mask is hollowed out, carved with peach blossoms, luxurious and exquisite, but it also covers up a large part of her face, giving her a hazy beauty that is still half covered by a pipa, but it also greatly disrupts the scenery. The eyebrows are not fully visible, half of the face is not visible, only the forehead, red lips, and small half of the left face. The posture is considered beautiful, but there is always a mask on the face, which can also disappoint people. Boss Liu, I have been ordered to handle the case. Shao Jin had no fondness for this brothel madam. What case is there in this brothel distillery to handle? Yesterday, the Minister of Personnel, Mr. Chang Zigue, had a drink with you. Lu Linger's eyes changed, but she remained calm. Not bad, Mr. Chang drank wine here yesterday. That's it, you'd better ask everyone in your building to come out. Shao Jingguan worshipped the third rank, but he was only in his 30s. It was the time when he was full of energy, and he couldn't help but be a bit domineering. Lord Shao wants to handle the case, so the people in Muxiang Lane can certainly cooperate. Lu Linger still had a smile on her lips, but the words she said made Shao Jin lose his temper. However, those nobles and adults who stayed in the building, could you please go and call them yourself? This. Shao Jin hesitated. Boss, would it be possible for Mr. Chang to go back alone? The person in the dark pondered for a moment and said, these adults who came to the building can't afford to offend anyone. There are many people now, so you can see if you have enough manpower later. Send someone to catch up and take a look. Boss's wife. Someone is calling out again somewhere. Here we go. A sigh drowned in the Muxiangfang where the birds sing and the swallows sing. Chongping Lane. The alley is deep, with some gray-red lanterns hanging. When the wind blows, the red lantern shakes and shakes. Although it's not winter, it's still very cold in the middle of the night. Chang Zigue squinted his eyes and walked slowly in the alley, stumbling a few steps forward without paying attention. He lowered his head in anger and kicked the stumbling stone, looked up at the dark alley, regretting not letting Peach Goose carry him a lantern. As the cold wind blew, his drunkenness increased. He trembled for a moment, looked around, ran to the corner, untied his pants, and felt a moment of relief. I urinated and woke up a lot from drinking. A minister of the Ministry of Personnel, who had done such a thing, was somewhat disrespectful. He looked around again, grateful that there was no one around, and also secretly thought that he should not show off his strength. The alley grew darker as it looked, with scattered dark red lanterns extending into the darkness ahead, like an invisible mouth. He shook his head and walked forward, touching the wall. The uneven wall pressed against his hands, and he felt a special silence around him. The small sound of bangs came from time to time, but he didn't hear the call to watch. It was midnight, and his heart was furrowing. With a meow, he trembled with fear. The cat's meowing came from somewhere, but he could only hear the sound and couldn't see where it was. He looked back and forth, shivering all over, and began to briskly walk towards home. Amitabha Buddha, blessed by Bodhisattva. Chang Zigui held on to the guanine jade around his neck, silently reciting the scriptures, his heart racing. He was very uncomfortable, with the yin wind piercing his neck, the light of the red lantern becoming blurred, his breathing becoming rapid, and the alley becoming quite long. There seemed to be someone staring at him in the darkness, and a chill rose from his spine. He walked faster and faster, and then he started running. In the corner of Gonchar Alley, a figure swayed, with bangs and lanterns placed next to it. Soon, the sound of water could be heard. Darui is in charge of the night watchman in Qianpiao Garden. Accustomed to the extravagance and debauchery of the wealthy and powerful, he couldn't help but sneer at these wealthy and powerful people, all of whom are just superficial things. He could only express these words quickly in his heart. He lifted his pants and tied them up, picked up the night watchman, and continued patrolling the streets. The hour has passed, and in 2 more hours, tonight is considered finished. Ah! A mournful scream shattered tonight's calm. Darui was startled, and the lantern in his hand shook and burst into flames. His consciousness was released, and the paper lantern fell to the ground. Flames were flickering, and the tongue of the fire twisted into a strange shape. What an evil sect! Just now, it seemed like someone was screaming. Darui regained his senses and ran towards the direction of the shouting, relying on his familiarity with Qianpiao Garden. The lanterns in Chongping Alley were swaying loudly in the wind. Darui didn't think much and rushed in. He stepped on something halfway, slipped and fell to the ground. Sitting on the ground, he saw that it was a dead black cat. Its hind legs were crushed by Darui's step, and the blood was sizzling. He was startled and recoiled a few times, causing pain in his buttocks and body. He quickly got up, calmed down, didn't look at the dead cat, but by some strange means, walked into the alley. Slowly moved towards the alley. The nearby staff whispered a few words in his ear, and Shao Jin glanced at Lu Linger, who was calm and composed, gradually changed his attitude. Boss Lu, don't blame anyone. I am also responsible. Could you please ask the people in your building to come out and ask a question on a regular basis? It's easy to say. She gave a light glance and the maid beside her retreated. Shao Jin came out of Muxiang Fong and achieved nothing. He wasted most of his time and only asked some maids, Gui Gong. Lu Linger also cooperated, but Shao Jin knew that his third-rank official, Lu Linger's woman, was still not taken seriously. Sir, what should we do? The staff asked him. Shao Jin's face turned black and he said, what should we do? Go back to the yamen and try that night watchman again. Ghosts, blue-faced and fanged ghosts. The blood has dried up, blood. At the court, Darui trembled like a sieve, repeating the words, ghost, and, blood-sucking. In the imperial capital's important area, the Minister of Personnel's attendant died tragically in the Flower Willow Lane. The news of the vampire monster spread widely, causing panic among the people of the imperial capital. Soon, another Minister of Justice's attendant died, and Long Yen was furious on the road to Kyoto, the hooves of the horses splashed with yellow-brown soil. The two rode together, galloping on horseback, and the shadows of the trees on the roadside flew backwards. Ride first, a yellow husky horse with white hair on its head, shaped like a crescent moon adorned with stars. The horse's body is covered in yellow hair, like a thin roll of gold, without any impurities. Those who know horses will surely marvel at them. A good horse. On the seat sat a woman with divine eyes, dressed in a constable uniform, holding a reins in one hand and a sword in the other, with a waist tag hanging from her waist, which read, Inspector General. Behind her, there was still a person on the horse, tightly tied, with hands tied back and a black cloth covering her head. Another black horse, also a woman. She was not wearing a uniform, but she also held a sword in one hand, held a reins in the other, wore strong clothing, rode alone, and closely followed the people in front. On the main road, only they galloped, and the dust they raised sometimes flew up a little on their faces, which they had already become accustomed to. The person in charge had an average appearance, but her eyes were particularly beautiful, with calm and sharp eyebrows and eyes. Her ears suddenly moved, and a fast horse ran towards them from the front. The person who came was a Yamen official. When he saw them, he immediately exclaimed, "Captain Jiang." He saw the female constable as if he had seen a savior. Chapter 3. After all, a few people are really dear, not knowing that they dream of being fish all day long. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jiang Hanyan, the only female constable in the Imperial Censorate, is on a business trip to investigate cases and has been away from the capital for 3 months. Both sides stopped, and the man dismounted and handed Jiang Hanyan a letter. After opening it and reading it, his eyebrows slightly raised as his female companion shouted, "Mississippi." Jiang Hanyan put away the letter and threw the person tied behind her to the tolerance. "Send the person to the Ministry of Justice. This is the person that Lord Lin wants. Shao Yun, let's go." After speaking, take Qiuyuan with you and gallop towards the capital. Du Keiyuan. Shao Jin paced back and forth in the public hall, occasionally looking out the door with a worried expression on his face. There was another official standing beside him, older than Shao Jin, with a stern eyebrow and long beard, showing a clear Confucian demeanor. He looks a bit calmer than Shao Jin and is also his superior, the left censor Yan Ling. "Lord Shao, please be calm and don't be impatient. I have already ordered someone to urgently summon me." "Lord Yan, do you think it's not urgent? In just a few days, another Minister of Justice has died and his blood has been drained, which is unbearable. The news of the vampire monster has spread widely, and the Emperor has ordered us to solve the case quickly, but we have no clue at all." Yan Ling still needed a few words of comfort. The sound of horses crowing had already come from outside, and the two of them suddenly relaxed their expressions and welcomed them out. "Han Yan, you're back." "Mr. Shao," Jiang Hanyan was about to bow when he was grabbed by Shao Jin's arm and dragged in. "I'll waive the courtesy. Hurry up, have someone bring Darui over. 2 adults, in your letter." "Han Yan, listen to me." Shao Jin told Jiang Hanyan about the case in a flash, and Yan Ling added the details to the side. Jiang Hanyan's eyebrows furrowed as she listened. After the case was narrated, Darui was also brought up. It has been several days now, but Darui still looks dazed, as if he has been scared out of his wits. Jiang Hanyan asked him a few questions, but also didn't find any useful clues. He only heard him half crazy and half silly talking about the strangeness of that night. "It's a monster with a blue face and fang teeth, blood dripping from the corners of its mouth, and it looks strange and not like a human. Its arms are spread out, very wide, and it can fly. Ghost, no, monster, it's a monster." Shao Jin sighed and said, "It's been several days since the trial. He's been talking about vampire monsters, evil spirits, and so on. The case of the Minister of Justice, Lord Shen, is even more bizarre. He lit a lamp in the study to handle his official duties, but the next day when he went in, he was already cold. The body was pale and twisted into a strange shape. There were 2 holes on his neck, and the blood was almost drained. There was a black mark on the wall of the study, which looked more and more like a huge bat hanging upside down. Mrs. Shen fainted on the spot and is still sick in bed." Qiuyuan listened and whispered, "Miss, shouldn't there really be any monsters?" Han Yan gave Qiuyuan a helpless glare and turned to Yan Ling, saying, "Sir, that corpse." Yan Ling said, "Don't worry, I have already invited Yuli. She is currently in the autopsy room." Jiang Hanyan said, "Since that's the case, then Lord Shao can take me to the crime scene first to take a look." Shenfu. Shen Qiuyuan, the Minister of Justice, came from a poor background and was an honest official. Shen's residence was not far from the Imperial Censorate. The courtyard was very simple, and there were only 7 servants, butlers, and maids in total. Shen, who was devoted to official duties and had no children, was a rare good official. However, he died in the study on October 7. Mrs. Shen fell ill and the butler took Jiang Hanyan and the others to the study. The study remained in its original state, except for the body, which had been moved away. There isn't much inside, except for lighting. There's only a storage cabinet, a bookshelf, a table, a few chairs, and a lounge chair. There was a cotton quilt on the lounge chair, and Shen Qiyuan often stayed up late to work and study. This was prepared by Mrs. Shen, but the quilt was still neatly folded. At the time of his murder, Shen Qiyuan was probably still investigating the case. There are some files on the desk, which are messy. Behind the desk are chairs and cabinets, but at this moment, the chairs and cabinets are not in their proper positions. They collapsed at a distance from the table, leaving the wall where the storage cabinet was placed empty. The black bat pattern on the wall was very prominent, and there was a pool of blood on the ground. Jiang Hanyan approached the black bat and smelled a faint fragrance of orchids. She touched the pattern on the wall with a white cloth, and the black ink-like mark seemed to have already grown on the wall. There was only a faint blue color on the white cloth. She immediately squatted down and examined the bloodstains on the ground. The entire room only had bloodstains between the walls and tables, and the bloodstains had dried up, not much. The blood lost by Shen Qiyuan really seems to have been sucked away by something. I don't know where it went. Jiang Hanyan turned around and continued to examine the fallen chair and storage cabinet. The chair had already fallen apart, with one leg and foot broken in 2. The storage cabinet also split in half from the center and fell a bit far. There were no signs of dragging on the ground, like a huge force rushing up and falling there. It was impossible for ordinary people to do so, and the entire scene looked very much like that of ghosts and monsters. Autumn Yun saw Jiang Hanyan still squatting, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. She also squatted down and whispered, "Miss, how are you?" Jiang Hanyan shook her head slightly and looked serious. She stood up and said to Shao Jindao, "Lord Shao, let's go to Chongping Lane and take a look." Chongping Lane. The small alleyway of Fireworks and Willow Alley is not very crowded at night, and even less visible during the day. Jiang Hanyan arrived at the place where Chang Zigui's body was found. Although no one was sent to guard it, he didn't need it either. The scene of Chang Zigui's death is simpler than Shen Qiyuan's, with only a few bloodstains and a black mark on the wall. The imprint was not as large as the Shen mansion, and the graphics were not clear. It looked more like a pile of black ink sprinkled out, with some scattered ink dots. Jiang Hanyan also smelled a faint scent of orchid. There is nothing else, and there are fewer clues for a simpler scene. Jiang Hanyan walked along the road for a while and saw the marks left by De Rui stepping on the black cat, not far from the place where Chang Zigui died. She looked up and saw that there were only walls around, with doors and lanterns hanging at a distance, all of which were the backyards of brothels and brothels. At that time, it was the best time for brothels and brothels to do business. No one would come to the backyard, nor did anyone know what was happening here. Apart from Derui, no second eyewitness was found. It's not easy to see this place from the surrounding high-rise buildings, and even if you can see it, no one will see the situation in the alley. Just one of the tall buildings caught Jiang Hanyan's attention. That house is grander and taller than the other buildings, and from where she stands, the windows above can be seen. "Lord Shao, is that Muxiang Fong over there?" Shao Jin looked up and said, "Not bad, that's Muxiang Fong. Mr. Zhang was harmed after coming out of Muxiang Fong. Have you ever visited Muxiangfang?" Shao Jin's face immediately turned black. "I checked, I didn't find anything." Jiang Hanyan's eyes turned and she asked, "I didn't find it, did I eat it and feel deflated?" Shao Jin remembered the prosperity of the day market and let out a cold snort. Alas, although Muxiangfang is a fireworks field, there are many nobles and ministers behind it, which is not a secret. The girls in that building are the best at pleasing those adults. Lu Ling'er is not a simple woman. Under the feet of the emperor, Muxiangfang can still claim to be the top floor in the world, and behind it, it is uncertain who the boss is. Why do you think this case is related to Muxiangfang? Jiang Hanyan shook her head and turned to say, Sir, let's go see if there are any clues at Yuli's place. Yamen, autopsy room. Shao Jin has some aversion to this place, it's gloomy and smelly. If it weren't for investigating the case, he wouldn't have come here at all. Jiang Hanyan looked in his eyes and shook his head. Entering the autopsy room, it didn't smell as bad as expected. There were 5 wooden beds, 2 beds were empty, 2 beds were covered with white cloth, and the white cloth on the body of the corpse on the bed had already been lifted. A woman in blue is examining the body, wearing a white scarf on her face and gloves on her hands. Sister Li. Qiuyun hadn't seen her for many days, so he couldn't help but call out first. As a result, Yuli seemed to have not heard her and focused on the body in front of her. As they approached, they only saw a nearly skeletal body lying on a wooden bed, while Yuli was holding the body's hand as thin as a stick and observing. She gently tugged at the corpse's finger, and a portion of its nail cap fell off. Qiuyun's expression immediately became as uncomfortable as swallowing a fly, and he wanted to vomit. Jiang Hanyan asked, Yuli, have you found anything? Yuli only then realized that someone had arrived. She lifted her head, took off a glove, took off a face scarf, and was such a pure and refined beauty. She walked to another wooden bed next to her, lifted the white cloth, and revealed another corpse, speaking very gently. Both adults died from excessive blood loss, with 2 small holes resembling sharp tooth marks on their necks. It is estimated that they were caused by the tip of a sharp blade. The death interval was 7 days, and the speed of death was fast without too much struggle, but it was very painful because their bodies twisted during the bleeding process. Based on the current situation, ordinary people cannot do it, and more clues can only be further explored after the relatives of the 2 adults agree to dissect. Shao Jin heard this and became anxious. He looked at Yuli, but his eyes dared not look at the body. So you don't have any clues, do you? Chapter 4. The Underworld should not eliminate Chivalry, who in the world will not have a poetic name. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuli explained, apart from knowing about excessive blood loss and 2 small holes, there's nothing. Is it really a monster transformed by a vampire bat? Shao Jin had a complex expression. Jiang Hanyan shook her head helplessly and said, Mr. Shao, I don't speak of strange and chaotic energy. It's only by keeping my mind focused that I won't be controlled by ghosts and gods. Besides, I can't determine anything yet. Shao Jin. But. Before Jiang Hanyan could speak, Qiuyun said first, but what's wrong, Lord Shao? With my young lady here, we can definitely find out the truth. Shao Jinsi said, all right, feel free to say anything you need. The entire inspectorate will fully cooperate. I have been bedridden recently, so I won't stay here. If you have any needs, feel free to say it. I'll bid farewell first. After finishing speaking, he quickly left the autopsy room. Jiang Hanyan, feeling both helpless and amused, tapped Qiuyun's head and said, it's impossible for you to be a fairy as your young lady. You deserve it so quickly. Anyway, it didn't fall on you in the end. Miss, you are the first goddess of the Imperial Censorate. Qiuyun spat out his tongue. Jiang Hanyan smiled indulgently and then watched as Yuli covered the body. Yuli, are the courses at the hospital too hard? Fortunately, most ladies have taught me before. I also go to the palace on time every month to keep track of the hospital's records, so I won't stay too long. After all, there is still business to attend to in the hospital. Yuli sorted out her tools and seemed to think of something. By the way, miss, have you returned to Beijing yet? Jiang Hanyan thought of something and gave a bitter smile, not yet. Yuli gave her a sympathetic glance. Chilyun was bored and saw a cloth covering the side, which looked very small and didn't look like a corpse. Her curiosity rose and she reached out to peel off the white cloth. She also asked, sisterly, what is this? Xiaoyun, don't. It's too late. A dead cat that had been dissected appeared in front of Chilyun, with a foul smell. Her stomach immediately turned upside down and she ran to the side. Yuli angrily said, You're also flipping through the things here. Oh. How did I know? Ah. Chilyun remained silent and continued to vomit. Jiang Hanyan walked up to the body of the black cat to check, is this the dead cat at the scene of Chang Zigui's murder case? Well, dissectors need to apply, cats don't need to. Yuli put on gloves and picked up the bloody cat's organs. I dissected the cat and found this. Jiang Hanyan looked at it and exclaimed in surprise, is this the heart-destroying palm? Yuli nodded and said, yes, heart-destroying palm. Jiang Hanyan narrowed her eyes and said, it's getting more and more interesting. Yuli said, if you knew there were actually 2 cases of murder and bloodletting before, you wouldn't find it interesting. What? There's a murder case. Jiang Hanyan frowned. The first one is on September 14th, and the first one is on September 21st. It turned out that a mysterious murder and bloodletting case had occurred a month ago, but it was only because the deceased were 2 ordinary people with flat heads and were suppressed by the government that there was no major disturbance at that time. But the case has remained unresolved, and now 2 court officials have died. Rumors of vampire monsters can no longer be suppressed, and there are various opinions among the people about what happened under the feet of the emperor. When the emperor found out, Longyan was furious, which made him anxious to solve the case. Jiang Hanyan's expression became serious, and in the end, she could only sigh. After a moment of silence in the autopsy room, Jiang Hanyan said to the 2, Yuli and Xiaoyun, whether they are humans or ghosts, we must catch this murderer. She held her hand tightly behind her back. The side hall of the Imperial Censorate is the office of the left censor. Jiang Hanyan met Yan Ling alone. When she walked into the room, Yan Ling was reviewing official documents. Jiang Hanyan, who used to patiently wait, did not do so this time. Mr. Yan. Yan Ling looked up and saw Jiang Hanyan. He put down his official duties and said, you're here. How are you doing? I understand the case now. Jiang Hanyan sneered, I understand and once again understand that human life also has a distinction between high and low. If it weren't for the death of 2 important figures in the 4 human lives, would Lord Yan not have planned to call me back? Yan Ling frowned and said, what are these words? You are also aware of my character. You should know that the cases I sent you to handle are all of great importance. Just now, Lord Fang sent a message that I have been put into prison and you have done a good job. Jiang Hanyan breathed a sigh of relief and said, what is the responsibility? Or, when it comes to this blood-sucking case, what happened to the 2 people who died before? Yan Ling dug out 2 volumes of files on the desk and gave them to Jiang Hanyan. I knew you would ask, but here are the details of those 2 cases. The reason why they were suppressed was because the rumors of vampires in the community were too fierce. For some reason, within half a month after you left the capital, a rumor of a vampire suddenly emerged in the community, saying that the monster had been practicing for thousands of years and specialized in sucking human blood at night. He never had to go out alone at night. At first it was just a rumor, but after a month, a person who poured incense and a beggar died. Shao Jin and I were afraid that rumors would spread and disrupt the security of the imperial city. That's why Shao Jin conducted a secret investigation. We didn't expect to see 2 maids die one after another. Chang Zigui is a luxurious and foolish official, but Lord Shen is a good official, and... Sigh. Yan Ling sighed as he thought of something. At this point, Jiang Hanyan had roughly finished reading the file and said, Your Excellency said that there was no connection between these 4 deceased individuals, but they all died from excessive blood loss. If it were human-made, the purpose of killing would be lost. Yanling sighed and said, "Yes, the first victim's name is Xian. He was a night owl who was discovered on East Street and died at midnight. He had a big hole in his neck and his blood was drained. The blood left at the scene was not enough to fit a person's needs. There was also a strange red pattern on the scene, resembling a talisman and a bat. The second place is a beggar, whose name is unknown. Others call him Shao, and his death method and scene are the same as Xian's. The two of them have a humble identity and a pure family background. The rest of Chang Zigui and Lord Shen, as you know, I really can't believe why the killer wanted to kill the four of them." Jiang Hanyan remained silent. Yanling said again, "My niece, I know you, like your father, are a good constable who is not afraid of ghosts and gods, and not afraid of power. Shao Jin, a scholar with only a few inches of strength, cannot solve this vampire demon case. Coincidentally, you have already completed Mr. Fong's orders. The primary task now is to solve these mysterious cases." Jiang Hanyan didn't show much expression, but she also replied, "I should do my best." "Sir, Hanyan will leave first." She left without waiting for Yanling to reply. Yanling looked at her departing figure, both spoiled and helpless. "Brother Ma Xiong, I really agreed to your words, your daughter." Yanling shook her head and continued to handle her official duties. East Street. Dongjia is not as good as Chongping Alley. Here, there are many lower-class people with different levels of education, and there are also quite a few people. It's almost nightfall, and the people around have long disappeared due to rumors of vampires. A good street has been empty recently. Jiang Hanyan led Qiuyun into a more empty alley and arrived at the scene of the death of the deceased Xiaoluzi. This was a dead alley and not deep. But it has been a month now, and there have been no traces here, just like Wang Fu's death scene. However, there are still some blood marks left, and the blood symbols of the ghosts and monsters in the ghost are still obvious. The night breeze is a bit cold. Qiuyun watched as Jiang Hanyan crouched down to study the bloodstains and blood symbols. The more she looked at the symbols, the more she felt like a Taoist's talisman to suppress ghosts. It was truly evil. She rubbed her arms but didn't want to disturb the lost miss, so she could only look around. At this glance, she saw a dark figure at the entrance of the alley sneakily looking inside. She shouted, "Who?" Chapter 5. Embrace the chivalrous spirit of 1,000 men and hold on to their palms to talk about a dream. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The black shadow ran away with its legs up, and Qiuyun flew out step by step. Jiang Hanyan also got up, but just waited in place. She looked at the blood marks on the ground and frowned. The blood marks here were the most in the 4 cases, and there were also scattered marks, indicating that Xiaoluzi seemed to have run or crawled for a while when his neck was punctured. After a while. "Go in, be honest." Autumn Yun escorted a small beggar back. Jiang Hanyan looked at the beggar. He was very dirty on his body, his face was relatively clean, very young, tied by Qiuyun, constantly struggling with the rope. She said to Qiuyun, "Shao Yun, it's been a while." Qiuyun replied, "Miss, this little beggar has good likeness skills and is very familiar with this area." He almost let him run away. "Be honest, don't move." She shouted at the struggling little beggar, but Jiang Hanyan said, "Shao Yun, let go of him." Qiuyun pouted, unwilling to let go, but still listened to the young lady's words and untied the beggar. Unexpectedly, as soon as he released it, the little beggar pounced on Jiang Hanyan, and with a quick set of body movements, he punched and slapped her. Even Qiuyun was startled, but Jiang Hanyan easily dodged, swaying left and right. She didn't even use her right hand, and with a sword in her left hand, she restrained the little beggar's hands. Jiang Hanyan curled her lips as she looked at the little beggar who was restrained and unwilling. Zhiyun Bagua Palm. I didn't expect that at your young age, you practiced this palm technique quite well. The little beggar angrily said, "Government lackey, please let go of me." Jiang Hanyan was not angry either and asked, "You can let go. Can you tell me why you are sneaking here?" The little beggar said, "I'm here to investigate." Jiang Hanyan. Investigating cases is an official matter. What case are you here to investigate? The little beggar said, "Pooh, the government is full of freeloaders. I'm here to investigate the case of the vampire demon and avenge my master." Jiang Hanyan. Master. Is that beggar who was killed your master? The little beggar turned his head and said, "Humph." Chiuyun saw the little beggar's arrogant attitude and said, "Miss, lock him up in the yamen for a trial and see if he is still arrogant." Jiang Hanyan smiled and let go of the little beggar. "Little brother, we will investigate the case. You can go back." The little beggar moved his body for a moment, and when he saw Han Yen and the two of them walking away, he turned his eyes and followed them again. Jiang Hanyan turned around and asked, "Little brother, why are you following us?" The little beggar hesitated for a moment and asked, "Do you really know how to find out the culprit?" Jiang Hanyan smiled and said, "Jiang Hanyan never lies." The little beggar exclaimed in surprise, "Are you Jiang Hanyan?" Chiuyun answered, "The first female catcher in the Imperial Censorate, this is the only one, there is no code." Jiang Hanyan angrily said, "Shao Yun, I'm not a salesperson. Little brother, go back quickly." The two turned around, but the little beggar stopped them again and said, "Captain Jiang, I have a clue about the vampire demon." Jiang Hanyan and the other stopped and glanced at each other. The beggar approached them and whispered to them, "Actually, when the first vampire demon incident occurred, my master began investigating it. Because Uncle Xian was his benefactor and saved his life, even though my master was a beggar, he knew how to repay kindness. Master didn't believe in any ghosts and monsters, and was determined to uncover the culprit who killed Uncle Xian. However, no one believed him, but he also suffered misfortune and died. I believe my master, this must be human-made. Why bother setting up a mystery when monsters kill, leaving behind terrifying ghost symbols? And when my master investigates, he will find out who killed Uncle Xian. Isn't it too coincidental that the case was hit by a mishap?" The little beggar stopped to look at Jiang Hanyan and the two of them, as if waiting for them to agree. Jiang Hanyan nodded and said, "Keep talking. My master is not an ordinary beggar. Ordinary beggars don't have the same level of martial arts as him. He must have threatened the murderer before being poisoned when he wanted to investigate. Unfortunately, my master didn't want to take me with him and didn't tell me about the investigation process. However, under my persistent insistence, he revealed the location." "Where is it?" Chiuyun asked urgently. "Muxiangfang. It's the largest brothel in the capital. Not long after master sneaked in, he died." He looked at Jiang Hanyan and saw her pondering something. The little beggar didn't disturb her and stood there obediently waiting. After a while, Jiang Hanyan asked softly, "Little brother, what's your name?" "My name is Shaola, and my mother calls me Lele." "Well, brother Shaola, thank you for your clue. You go back first, and it's better not to show up if there's no need. Leave the rest to us, and I will definitely find out the truth." Shaola hesitated to speak, wanting to follow them to investigate the case, but looking at Jiang Hanyan's smiling face, he nodded obediently. Jiang Hanyan patted his shoulder and left with Chiuyun. Shaola watched them leave in place before reluctantly leaving. Jiang Hanyan and the others didn't go far when they met Yuli who had been found. At this moment, Yuli had changed her clothes, and the light pink clothes also made her more elegant and refined. Jiang Hanyan asked, "Did you have a clue?" Yuli nodded and said, "I'll listen to you. I'll dissect and autopsy the unrelated Xian and the beggar. I found something in the beggar's body. The beggar is a practitioner, and his martial arts should not be weak. In his body, I found a kind of enchanting fragrance. Yuxian powder. What is it? It is a fragrance that can cause people to hallucinate. It has a faint floral aroma, with different doses and effects. It can make people feel powerless and hallucinate, and can be used to relieve fatigue. Moreover, because its formula contains ambergris, it is generally only used in places with fireworks. It seems necessary to go to Muxiangfang. Let's go. Jiang Mansion. It was said that they were going to Muxiangfang, but Jiang Hanyan and the others still went home first. She has been away for March and has been busy with her case since returning. It has been 2 days since she left home, and when she returned today, it was already Su-Shi. When they knocked on the door, Xia San and Jiang Hanyan exchanged glances, and Jiang Hanyan and Qiu Yun felt a chill behind their backs. Xia San whispered, "It's still in the classroom." Jiang Hanyan sighed and honestly went to the lobby. There were 2 people in the hall, one with an excellent temperament sitting upright in the center, and the other standing aside. Jiang Hanyan entered and called out, "Mother, third auntie." Qiu Yun also followed suit and shouted, "Madam, third auntie." Then in silence, Jiang Hanyan silently prepared herself in her heart. With a loud bang, the beautiful woman patted the table. Qiu Yun trembled uncontrollably and only heard her husband say, "You still know you're coming back." Jiang Hanyan smiled apologetically and said, "Mom, this is my home, of course I will come back." "Stop it. You and your damn father have the same temper. They spend all day on cases, or else they won't be at home in February or March. He's just a rough guy, you're a woman." Bai Muqing felt that if it weren't for her skillful demeanor, she would have been so angry that her hair would have fallen out long ago. Jiang Hanyan knew it was not appropriate to speak now, so she exchanged glances with Yuli. Yuli smiled and walked over to Bai Muqing, saying softly, "Madam, Miss has been running around for so long, and it's too late today. It's better for her and Xiaoyun to go rest first and come back tomorrow to ask for help. You also need to take a beauty sleep, right?" Bai Muqing glanced at Jiang Hanyan and Qiu Yun, but couldn't bear to stare at Yuli. She glanced at Jiang Hanyan again and said to Yuli, "You know how to face them. Let's go and help me back to the room." Chapter 6. Dancing sleeves in heaven and earth, flowers falling and blossoming in another spring. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuli nodded with a smile, and before leaving, she looked back at Jiang Hanyan with a smile. Jiang Hanyan also blinked at her. After they left, Jiang Hanyan and Qiu Yun both relaxed. At this moment, Aunt San walked over and said, "Miss, I have prepared hot water for you." "Thank you very much, Aunt San." Jiang Hanyan said after thanking her, "Could Aunt San please help me find 2 sets of men's clothing?" Aunt San was confused, but she still followed suit. After bathing, Jiang Hanyan changed into a men's outfit. She held a folding fan in her hand, although not more handsome than Pan and then Zijian. Fortunately she was tall enough, tall and slender, and the folding fan was easily displayed, which could be considered elegant. She walked out and Qiu Yun had already changed into men's clothing. Jiang Hanyan looked at it and smiled. The folding fan lifted Qiu Yun's chin and said, "Which young master is this from? He's so handsome." "No, Qiu Yun is already beautiful. She wears men's clothing with red lips and white face, and her height is not high. She really looks like a handsome young master from a wealthy family." Qiu Yun moved the fan and coquettishly said, "Miss, even if we want to investigate Muxiangfang, we don't need to dress up like this." Jiang Hanyan tapped Qiu Yun's head with a fan and said, "What do you know? Shao Jin is also a tough guy. He dare not offend Muxiangfang. Why bother to cause trouble for Lord Yen?" Qiu Yun pouted, "But even if we dress like this, there won't be 100 tails in places like Muxiangfang. Can we get in?" Jiang Hanyan's fan twirled in her hand and smiled, "The mountain people have their own tricks. Muxiangfang back alley. It's already the hour of high, and the Muxiangfang is already singing and dancing with Sheng and Shao, so lively. The back alley was empty, and two figures swiftly climbed over the high wall of Muxiangfang. It's not an exaggeration to describe Muxiangfang as magnificent, but it's a bit tacky. In Muxiangfang, there are tables, chairs, rooms, and doors, and even the stairs and lighting are noble, elegant, and beautiful. Walking in the bustling Muxiangfang corridor, Chiuyan avoided the men and women with Meng Lang's behavior and whispered to Jiang Hanyan, "Miss, the clever trick you said is to climb over the wall." Jiang Hanyan didn't feel the embarrassment of Chiuyan. She looked around and saw several familiar faces, but they couldn't recognize her. "If you don't climb over the wall, don't think about coming in. Do you expect the Imperial Censorate? Do you think that Lord Yen and Lord Shao would use public funds to let us visit brothels? Don't even think about their own salaries, they might not even be enough to walk the threshold." Chiuyan thought about it too. Although she didn't really like Yen Ling and Shao Jin, at least they never accepted any money beyond their salaries. But now, those familiar faces in the building don't need to be explicit. The two wandered around the second floor without finding any useful clues for the time being. Today, Muxiangfang is particularly noisy. The first floor is already full of people, all around the stage in the middle of the building. It is said that there may be some performance today. Jiang Hanyan scanned the structure of Muxiangfang and suddenly felt a pain in her body. She collided with a person, who was pushed back by her. "Hey, do you have long eyes? Dare to bump into the landlady of Muxiangfang." A servant-like person shouted to Jiang Hanyan. "Shut up, don't be rude to the guests," Lu Linger stopped the servants. She looked up at the person she had bumped into, first noticing a special pair of eyes before finally seeing the whole picture. "This young master looks a bit unfamiliar, is it his first time here?" Jiang Hanyan also regained consciousness from Lu Linger's golden mask and nodded, but did not respond. Lu Linger smiled and said, "I wish you all the best in Muxiangfang." Jiang Hanyan remained silent and nodded with a smile. However, her and Lu Linger's eyes met, and she found them to be a pair of deep, beautiful, alluring, and dangerous eyes. They staggered, and Lu Linger passed in front of her, emitting a fragrance of orchids. Jiang Hanyan kept watching her leaving figure until she disappeared around the corner. Chiuyan also looked at the charming and unique owner of Muxiangfang and couldn't help but ask, "Miss, why do you think she's wearing a mask? With her unique charm and voice, she should be a beauty." Jiang Hanyan knocked on Chiuyan's head with a fan again and said, "If you want to call me young master, would you also become a disciple in this way? Curious about someone else's appearance?" Chiuyan rubbed his head and muttered softly, "I usually use a sword to strike, but now I use a fan. If I strike again, I'll be foolish." Jiang Hanyan doted on her smile, but her thoughts were still taken away by Lu Linger. She rarely investigates cases in brothels, so she should investigate this Lu Linger before coming secretly. Suddenly, the lights in Muxiangfang were all dim, and leisurely music played. The whole building is silent and silent. Breathing sounds, very light. A beam of bright white light and pen fell straight onto the stage in the center of the first floor. A rain of petals began to fall inside, and a graceful figure gracefully fell in the moonlight and flower shadows. Petals rise from the bottom of the building, colorful and filled with tulips. Light music plays in silence, everything becomes enchanting. A bright white light shone from the rooftop onto the stage in the center of the first floor, and she landed in the center of the stage like a fairy. The first beauty of Muxiangfang, the flower queen Shuanghe. Her graceful figure curved 3 times, standing gracefully in the middle of the stage. As soon as she fell, she was already in a dancing position, but did not move. Although she didn't feel the wind, her already cool and thin dance dress fluttered gently. Her slender lotus arms, like a willow's slender waist, and slender legs vaguely attracted people's attention. The music entered a gentle interlude, and everyone waited. Everyone held their breath and stared at the beauty in the middle of the stage, even Jiang Hanyan and Chiuyan were no exception. Jiang Hanyan has traveled far and wide, and has seen many beauties, but the beauty of Xuanghe is no longer like that of the human world. Her picturesque and fresh appearance is not enough to describe. It's just a lift of the eye, like a pool of spring water that has just melted in the early snow, with a bone-chilling coldness and a seductive charm that makes people unable to move their eyes, incredibly beautiful. Standing there, she was already beautiful in her heart, causing a sudden tremble in her heart. Both men and women couldn't avoid being amazed. The drum beat suddenly. The frost moved. The music is a typical dance piece, but the dance is like a startled swan, like a banished immortal, like a spiritual snake, like a flying swallow. Its dance posture and demeanor cannot be described without the literary talent of Chao Zijian's Luotian Fu. A dance that sweeps the city, nothing more than that. Jiang Hanyan and Qiu Yun were both like the others in the building, staring blankly. Until Xuanghe finished his curtain call and left, he couldn't come to his senses for a while. Jiang Hanyan noticed that there was a coldness emanating from Xuanghe's bones. With such a beautiful and moving dance, she never had a trace of a smile from beginning to end. Not laughing has already stirred up wrinkles in people's hearts. If you smile, wouldn't it be that all the spring flowers in the mountains suddenly bloom together? Qiuyan foolishly regained his senses and whispered, "Young master, are flower queens all so beautiful? I thought Sister Li was already very beautiful, but I didn't expect to see such a woman again." Jiang Hanyan looked at Qiuyan and smiled. She had already settled her mind, but couldn't help but sigh, with the most beautiful woman in the world, how could Muxiangfang not be the top building in the world? Qiuyan said again, "But it's really a pity that such a woman fell into the fireworks field." Jiang Hanyan did not respond to this. At this moment, Muxiangfang is also bustling again. Different from the previous lively atmosphere. The commotion at this moment is all about clamoring to see Xuanghe and watch the sound of dance, even if it means throwing 1,000 taels of gold. Xuanghe was extremely popular and the scene was once difficult to control. Jiang Hanyan witnessed the determination of these powerful tycoons to pursue beauty, which is a comparison between those with power and those with money. They are here indulging in debauchery, yet unaware of the hardships of the people. Jiang Hanyan looked coldly at these people who were the pillars of the court, feeling inexplicable grief in his heart. The scene has become quite chaotic, as if sparks have been ignited by the collision of power and money. Someone has become angry and is about to start fighting. Chapter 7 Notice. Shao Ri's Cloud Chronicles, once promised to be the first class in the world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The market in Muxiangfang seems to have a tendency to be smashed, with a lot of commotion and drunkenness. Watching the excitement is never too big. But there were also several who looked on coldly, like Jiang Hanyan, a few Jianghu tycoons, and a few promiscuous young masters. They seemed to be more elegant when they came to the brothel. At least these fat-headed officials, nobles, and local tycoons couldn't catch their eye, let alone worry that Xuanghe Miss would take a liking to them. Because in their hearts, Xuanghe is like a goddess. She sells her skills but not herself. She is a strange woman who emerges from the mud without being stained, evoking endless imagination. What cannot be obtained is always in turmoil. They can't get it either, but they know how to maintain their so-called demeanor and watch coldly. The noise was so loud, but the incident of smashing the venue still didn't happen. Lu Linger stood in the center of the stage and in a few words, the scene quieted down. I don't know what she looks like under the golden mask, but the slightly hooked lips and calm demeanor have already conquered everyone, let alone the words she says that make people speechless. It was said that Xuanghe only performed once in public for a month, and everything else was up to her mood. If she didn't want to come out, no one could invite her. If she wanted to become a guest of Xuanghe, she had to rely on her abilities. Muxiangfang is the first building in the world, and there is a reason for it. Rules are rules, and no one can break them. Strange goods can still live, let alone beauties. As the most beautiful woman in the world, Xuanghe should have her pride, Otherwise wouldn't she lose her value, and the gentlemen who came to Muxiangfang would also lose their status. Lu Ling'er glanced lightly at the two people who were clamoring to take action and said, Mr. Chen and Mr. He, coming to Muxiangfang is just for fun. Why hurt the harmony? Mr. Zhang's land transportation business is thriving, and he wants to enter the grand plan of water transportation. Mr. Hua is about to be promoted to the position of Minister of Water Transportation, and his uncle is also a servant of the Ministry of Revenue. They are all influential figures. Why not be unhappy about a small matter? Chen Hai and He Shan woke up halfway after drinking, and immediately turned off the fire. They exchanged a glance and smiled awkwardly. Upon seeing this, Lu Ling'er curved her lips and with a gesture, someone immediately brought a pot of wine. She picked up the wine jug made of white jade and smiled, saying, Muxiangfang is open for business. Guests can thrive only when they are fully entertained. If the rules of Muxiangfang make everyone unhappy today, I, Lu Ling'er, would like to apologize to all of you. With a simple lift of her hand and a flick of her slender neck, a pot of wine poured into her stomach. She put down the wine jug and gave a glance to the people under her, then said, Tonight, everyone, enjoy yourselves. The water and wine you drink will be treated to me, Lu Ling'er. As soon as the words fell, the music began to play, and a group of dancers gracefully stepped onto the stage with their sleeves raised high. Lu Ling'er was among them, slowly retreating without saying anything more. The atmosphere in Muxiangfang has returned to its usual state. Seeking pleasure and having fun, singing and dancing on the Xingshao. Jiang Hanyan saw that Chen Hai and He Shan Lai, who were almost about to fight, had already pushed their cups and replaced them, and then withdrew from the crowd together, disappearing on the first floor. I don't know where I went inside the building. Jiang Hanyan curled her lips and whispered to Qiu Yun, Shao Yun, it's time for us to take action too. Qiu Yun was puzzled and said, Young master, what action will you take? Jiang Hanyan's fan fell on Qiu Yun's head again, of course it's for investigation. You can find a few girls to inquire about who received Chang Zigui that day and what they did. Qiu Yun blinked and said, but young master, I don't have money. I can't tie up a few girls to ask. Jiang Hanyan pondered for a moment, scanned the building with her eyes, and then saw a chubby man with a big belly. She asked Qiu Yun to whisper a few words in her ear. Qiu Yun widened his eyes and exclaimed in surprise, Ah, miss, you let me steal. Jiang Hanyan covered Qiu Yun's mouth and whispered, that's called requisition. That chubby guy is the son of the Minister of Rights, and he worships the eunuch Zhang Yao as his godfather. He usually scrapes off the people's wealth and cream. Today, let's consider him to contribute to the crime investigation, which can also be considered a good deed. Qiu Yun pursed his lips, knowing that he couldn't do it. What about you, young master? Jiang Hanyan folded her fan and smiled, I have my own plans. Shao Yun, go ahead and be careful in everything. Qiu Yun was pushed by Jiang Hanyan, and she sighed. She walked towards the fat man, brushed past him, and touched him with her hand. The fat man didn't feel anything and walked past Jiang Hanyan. Jiang Hanyan saw Qiu Yun shake the silver note in his hand and nodded in satisfaction. The master and servant exchanged glances and acted separately. Jiang Hanyan first strolled around the second floor, and the guests upstairs were more distinguished than the guests downstairs. Jiang Hanyan had already seen several royal relatives in this circle. When she saw a prominent young man in a yellow shirt, she immediately covered her face with a fan, clearly an acquaintance. Prince Yu, Li Hongyan. Encountering that gentleman, she doesn't want to investigate tonight either. Seeing Prince Yu getting closer and closer, Jiang Hanyan swept his eyes and hid in the dark corridor, flying onto the beam of the house, finally avoiding it. She was originally planning to go down, but she saw Chen Hai and He Shan Lai, who had just disappeared, sneaking into the depths of the corridor. She thought for a moment and secretly followed suit. At a corner, Chen and He blocked a person's way. Lu Ling'er. Lu Linger didn't panic either. It didn't seem surprising that she was blocking the way for the two of them. She smiled and said, "Two gentlemen, what advice do you have?" Chen Hai took out a stack of silver bills and handed them to Lu Linger. "Boss Lu, please accept them with a smile." Lu Linger smiled but did not answer. "If you have no merit, you will not be rewarded, Mr. Chen." He Shanlai also took out a stack of silver bills and handed them to Lu Linger, saying, "Hey, Boss Lu, it's our fault today. We've disturbed the business of Muxiangfang. How can we make you spend money?" They looked at each other with a smile, and Chen Hai said, "Boss Lu, you should take this money. Don't refuse." Their expressions as they looked at Lu Linger always had a tacit understanding. Lu Linger maintained a smile and reached out to take the silver note. "Since the two gentlemen have given me Lu Linger face, how can I save them face? Only when the two gentlemen are friendly can they make money, right?" The two of them spoke in unison, "Yes, yes, yes." Boss Lu said yes. Chen and he burst into laughter. When they saw that Lu Linger was just looking at them, Chen Hai immediately reacted and said, "The building is bustling. Mr. Lu is busy, so we won't disturb him. Goodbye, goodbye." Lu Linger smiled slightly again, her smile never stopping at the same arc. "Those two gentlemen have fun playing," she said. Chen and he left, and Lu Linger looked at their backs. She didn't even count the silver bills in her hand, so she called for a maid and gave her the silver bills. "Go, distribute them to the girls who have been introduced today," she said. "Yes, boss lady." The maid retreated, and Lu Linger straightened her skirt before coldly patrolling the building. Jiang Hanyan emerged from the darkness and smiled. He is indeed a person. With the establishment of a stable and imposing reputation, he didn't forget to build a bridge for Chen Hai and Hishan. "I'm afraid he has earned back the money for tonight's drinks." She guessed the purpose of Chen He and his companions looking for Lu Linger, and was surprised that He Shanlai had only verbally mentioned that he would be appointed as the transport commissioner. Even before the official letter was sent, Lu Linger had already known the news. Chen Hai, a land transportation giant, actually wants to participate in the transportation of goods, and Lu Linger is also clear about it. As Shao Jin said, Lu Linger is really not a simple woman. Jiang Hanyan became curious about Lu Linger. This curiosity stems from the instinct of a constable. Lu Linger must have many secrets, and coincidentally, she likes to uncover them. But now, let's first search for clues about the vampire demon case. Jiang Hanyan remembers that from the direction seen from Chongping Lane, there was a location on Muxiangfang where he could clearly see Chang Zigui's crime scene. Although there may not be any clues found, the only clues now point to Muxiangfang, and without any new clues, it is still necessary to go to that room to take a look. Now is the time when most people are in the front hall, and the back room is almost empty. Jiang Hanyan quickly found the room with her memory and skills. This room is located on the third floor, it's a separate room, and there are no rooms on either side. The room was pitch black, and Jiang Hanyan confirmed that there was no one inside. He pushed the door and sneaked in. As soon as I entered the room, there was a faint fragrance that was very comfortable, but I couldn't tell exactly what the fragrance was. Chapter 8. In standing talks, life and death are same, one promise is precious. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The decoration inside the room is simple, but not ordinary. Even a lamp holder is carved from yellow pear wood, indicating that the owner of the room holds a high position in the building. It wasn't until Jiang Hanyan saw various exquisite masks on the dressing table that she realized it was Lu Linger's room. No wonder the layout inside the room was simple and exquisite. But what kind of fragrance is this? Clearly, Lu Linger has a faint fragrance of orchids on her body. Jiang Hanyan walked towards the dressing table, where everything was neatly arranged except for the mirror. She picked up a mask casually and thought about Lu Linger's appearance, unable to figure out what kind of beautiful face the mask was covering. She shook her head and put down her mask. Walking to the window, she placed the fan on the windowsill and pushed open the window with both hands. Below the window was the backyard of Muxiangfang. That is a huge courtyard not inferior to the size of the royal mansion, with mountains and water, gardens and pavilions. The mountain is a rockery with a unique shape. The water is a clear lake, with lotus and unique fountains. It's not summer, and the lotus flowers are not yet blooming, but the fountains are filled with a gurgling clear spring. The garden was meticulously decorated by the gardener, and the pavilion is located in the center of the lake. This scenery is no less beautiful than Suzhou's gardens, and every place is meticulously decorated, truly a masterpiece. Looking further out, there is the night of the capital city, with 9 winding alleys and 18 bends, crisscrossing alleys, and red lanterns intertwined with each other. At midnight, only the streets and alleys are illuminated, while the rest is pitch black. Otherwise, the lights of every household would have a unique flavor. Jiang Hanyan's gaze searched in the night and she saw Chongping Lane. Sure enough, you can just see the situation of that alley in this room, but it's not very clear, let alone at night. She pondered and organized all the clues. Suddenly, footsteps came from outside, and Jiang Hanyan immediately closed the window and hid in a corner. It was Lu Linger who came back and accompanied her to another maid. As soon as Lu Linger came in, she sat at the table with her hands propped on her forehead, looking a bit tired. Her maid said, "Boss, should I bring you some sobering soup?" Lu Linger shook her head and said, "No need, I haven't had much to drink. It's just that I haven't had a good rest recently and I'm feeling a bit tired. You can go outside and help me, I'll take a break for a while." "This." "Yes, boss lady." The maid hesitated for a moment and could only retreat, knowing that Lu Linger was speaking without hesitation. Jiang Hanyan has been observing in the dark. Lu Linger supported her shoulders and moved her neck, getting up and heading towards the dressing table, apparently wanting to take off her attire and rest. However, when Lu Linger sat in front of the dressing table and saw the mask she had placed herself, her eyes changed and became sharp. Lu Linger got up and scanned the room, inch by inch familiar to her. However, suddenly she saw a fan by the window that did not belong to her. Similarly, Jiang Hanyan also saw and noticed that Lu Linger was walking towards the window. Jiang Hanyan's eyes rolled, as if thinking about how to escape, but the next moment a bright dagger had already been stabbed towards her. Lu Linger didn't go to the window and went straight to Jiang Hanyan's hiding place. Without saying a word, she stabbed a dagger into the corner, but the dagger was easily knocked down. She was startled and exclaimed, "Come on." Jiang Hanyan had already rushed out and hit Lu Linger's acupoint, making her unable to call out. Lu Linger saw the person in front of her clearly, her eyes flickering with surprise. Unable to speak or move, she eagerly watched as the guest who had met her before smiled and bowed to her. "Mr. Lu, I apologize for taking the liberty of breaking into the boudoir." Lu Linger's eyes quickly calmed down and she stared closely at the stranger with a smile in front of her. Jiang Hanyan and Lu Linger stared at each other. The room is quiet. Lu Linger calmed down too quickly, and those eyes had already scanned the person in front of her. As the boss of Muxiangfang, she has countless skills in reading people. Anyone can be seen under her scanning, but the person in front of her is also very calm. Lu Linger knew that he was definitely not an ordinary person and would be difficult to deal with, but she still maintained the calmness that Mu Xiangfang's boss should have. Jiang Hanyan pondered her words under Lu Linger's gaze. She looked into her eyes and decided to first unlock Lu Linger's acupoints. After seeing Lu Linger relieve her acupoints, she did not shout. Jiang Hanyan apologized first and said, "Boss Lu, I have offended you." "Boss, it's not good." Taoyan forgot to knock on the door and pushed it in. When she saw a man in Lu Linger's room, she was stunned. Lu Linger lowered her face and asked, "What's up?" Taoyan didn't know who the man in front of her was, but she still walked up to Lu Linger and whispered a few words in a low voice. Lu Linger's eyes changed, and she didn't care that Jiang Hanyan was still present. She quickly walked to the window and pushed it open. I saw two figures fighting in the empty backyard. Jiang Hanyan also walked over at this moment, and she was stunned when she saw the situation outside the window. The person fighting was one of the Huakui Shuanghe, who was dancing in the city, and the other was none other than her maid Qiuyun. Qiuyun has been practicing martial arts with famous masters since childhood, and his martial arts are very good. However, Shuanghe's martial arts skills are not weak, and he still has the upper hand. Shuanghe only wore an inner garment, with wet and disheveled hair. The clothes were soaked in water droplets, making it impossible to hide her seductive figure. Her moves were forcefully pushing Qiuyun to the brink of death. Lu Linger's lips were pulled very flat, as if angry. She asked Tao Yen, "How are the guests in the building now?" Tao Yen said, "The people in the building haven't noticed yet, they are still playing." Lu Linger cursed, "You ignorant girl. Go, take someone with you, and follow me to the backyard." She finished speaking and was about to go out, but she bumped into the folding fan by the window. Lu Linger frowned and picked up the fan for a glance, then threw it back into Jiang Hanyan's hand. "No matter who you are, I have no time to talk to you now." After that, she took Peach Goose to the backyard. Jiang Hanyan glanced again at Qiuyun, who was fighting harder and harder against Shuanghe, and followed suit. Muxiangfang, backyard. When Lu Linger arrived at the backyard, the lotus leaves in the lake and the flower beds in the garden had already been affected. There were 2 maids and 2 servants by her side, but Tao Yen did not come and stayed in the building to entertain guests. Jiang Hanyan also went to the backyard afterwards, and Lu Linger glanced at her but ignored her. On the contrary, Jiang Hanyan scrutinized the 4 people around her, each with a full and sunken temple, practicing Xianmen Gang Qi and Taoist internal skills. It seems that besides the sparkling wine, there are also many experts in Muxiangfang. Qiuyun over there has been forced to retreat step by step, and for some reason, he seems to be deliberately avoiding Shuanghe. On the contrary, Shuanghe's every move is more and more ruthless. Although Qiuyun is young, there are only a few in the martial arts world who can defeat her, which shows that Shuanghe's martial arts are also at the level of first-class experts. However, during the observation process, Jiang Hanyan found that Shuanghe's martial arts were good or bad, but all of them were sinister and ruthless evil martial arts. The soul-chasing claw of an old woman from Yenshan, the Yin Wind Hunyuan finger of ghosts and sorrows, and the widow fist of a black widow, these are all famous and vicious martial arts in the martial arts world, and some have long been lost. Qiuyun also noticed that Shuanghe's martial arts were strange. He blocked Shuanghe's 2 fingers that were digging towards her eyes, and Qiuyun hurriedly said, "Don't hit me. I said it wasn't intentional." Shuanghe didn't respond, but his face was as cold as ice. He raised his hand to open the Qiuyun grid and slapped Qiuyun's chest with a palm. That palm seemed to have 1,000 weights, and it turned black when it was released. Jiang Hanyan's eyes changed. Heartbreaking palm. Qiuyun's reaction was also quick, he withdrew his strength and reached out to block the fatal palm. The palm wind swept over the flowers on the side, causing them to wither and decay in an instant. Qiuyun dodged this deadly palm, but was still knocked out by Shuanghe's other hand and landed not far from Jiang Hanyan and the others. Shuanghe looked at his palm and stopped attacking Qiuyun. Chapter 9. A song startles the goose, a dance reflects on the shadow. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She opened her mouth, her voice as cold as a yellow warbler coming out of the valley or a October frost, just like her, female. Qiuyun rubbed her chest and glared angrily at Shuanghe. I gave way to you, but you took my life. You look so beautiful, your heart is like a snake and scorpion. Jiang Hanyan called out, Shao Yun. Miss, Qiuyun ran to Jiang Hanyan with a look of grievance on her face. Lu Linger saw that the 2 of them knew each other and gestured to the 4 people around her not to act recklessly. Jiang Hanyan glanced at Shuanghe, whose clothes were soaked, and asked, "What did I tell you? Why did you start fighting with her?" Chilean finally said, "Miss, you asked me to ask a few girls, but they are all so scary. They always hug their waist, touch their chest, and pick their clothes. I threw away my money and ran away. When I ran, I was too panicked, and ended up breaking into the courtesan's room. I didn't know she was taking a shower. I want to explain, but she would have killed me without saying a word. If it weren't for my good martial arts, I wouldn't have seen you Mississippi." Lu Linger frowned and also saw the ear hole on Jiang Hanyan's ear. She sneered, "Why do I always feel strange when I see you? It turns out it's a girl. Why did a girl come to my Muxiang Fang?" Jiang Hanyan smiled and said, "For the sake of human life." Lu Linger was stunned for a moment, but she didn't let Jiang Hanyan intimidate her. She snorted coldly and said, "Human life. Muxiang Fang. Since I'm called Muxiang Fang here, I only care about the wind and moon, only wine and sex. What's the difference between human life and Muxiang Fang?" Boss Lu's words are not accurate. Alcohol is a poison that penetrates the intestines, and color is a steel knife on the head. The wind and moon in your building are not simple. Just by bridging the gap between Chenhai and Hishanlai, it may make many people unable to eat and clothe. You don't take it seriously, but a few taels of silver may be enough to make a poor family spend most of the month. Lu Linger sneered again, "You only see that others are poor. Are the girls in my building just young ladies from wealthy families who have eaten enough to sell their bodies and play? This is a place for seeking pleasure, and the news is also earned by the girls through their looks. I am a businessman, and with such a large group of people in the building to support, I am not a philanthropist. Your reasoning should be told to other brothels and see if they will take notice." Jiang Hanyan smiled awkwardly, and Lu Linger said, "Even the wise don't speak in secret. I see you're a girl. What are you doing in my room?" Jiang Hanyan's expression became serious. "Of course, there are some questions that I would like to consult with Mr. Lu, who is well informed. What benefits do you have from asking me for news?" Jiang Hanyan smiled and pursed her lips, shaking her head. After thinking for a moment, Lu Linger asked again, "So who are you and for whose life?" Jiang Hanyan still smiled, thinking about how to reveal her identity when suddenly someone barged in. Jiang Hanyan looked at Chilean angrily and noticed a cold gaze falling on her. She looked at Shuanghe, who was also looking at her. Even with messy hair and clothes, Shuanghe was as beautiful as a dewdrop-soaked flower. She turned to Jiang Han and said, "Together." Between the words, internal strength had already gathered in the hands, and the green and jade hands were slightly blackened. Upon seeing it, Jiang Hanyan was indeed a heart-wrenching palm. She clenched the fan tightly, but Lu Linger heard a sharp shout from her, "Shuanghe, don't stop." Shuanghe took credit, but his expression remained indifferent, like an iceberg that no one could melt. Lu Linger let out a slight sigh and gave her subordinates a glance. A maid then walked towards Shuanghe with her clothes in hand. On the cold wind-blowing night, Shuanghe didn't care at all about his soaked body. "Shuanghe, go back to the room and soak your body well, don't let the cold catch you." Shuanghe wanted to nod, but as he looked at Jiang Hanyan and the two of them, he didn't move again. Upon seeing this, Lu Linger turned to Jiang Hanyan and asked, "What exactly are your two identities?" Jiang Hanyan knew that it was meaningless to keep it a secret. Since Shuanghe knew how to use the heart-destroying palm, she should have revealed her identity. She took out the plaque of the Imperial Censorate. "Are you Jiang Hanyan?" Lu Linger's eyes slightly changed as she looked at her unexpectedly. "Mr. Lu also knows that he is just a lowly servant." "Oh, the famous first female constable in the capital, who knows? I can see for sure who your life is for." Jiang Hanyan clarified her identity, and Lu Linger immediately understood many things. Looking at her, her gaze was not so friendly, but there was also a hint of inexplicable emotions hidden. But Xuanhe was even colder than before, with a strong intention of making trouble again. Lu Linger's gaze signaled to Xuanhe not to act rashly, and she said in a deep voice, "Captain Jiang, why didn't you ask Mr. Shao enough last time?" Jiang Hanyan smiled and said, "Since Mr. Lu cooperated so well with Mr. Zhao's investigation last time, I'm sure he won't make things difficult for me this time, will he? I have been ordered to investigate the case and would like to ask Mr. Lu some questions." "Oh, of course there's also Miss Xuanhe." Xuanhe asked coldly, "What do you mean?" Lu Linger also seemed to be angry and lowered her face. Jiang Hanyan was about to ask, but suddenly his face changed. In the darkness, a black shadow as fast as a flying bat flew towards them from the sky under the cover of the night, and Xuanhe happened to have his back to it. Jiang Hanyan exclaimed, "Be careful." Xuanhe's skills were also agile, and he dodged the sharp claws of the black shadow. Qiuyun also flew up and fought against the black shadow. The black shadow revealed the steel claws on his hand, forcing Qiuyun to retreat. It also landed on the pavilion in the center of the lake, hanging upside down on the top of the pavilion. Everyone was stunned. The black image of a person, but also wearing a monster mask with blue fangs, hung upside down on the pavilion, like a huge bat. The hands overlapping on the chest carried a pair of cold steel claws. Vampire Demon. That strange outfit looks like a blood-sucking monster that has been causing a lot of noise during this period. Xuanhe and Qiuyun flew towards the pavilion at the same time, hitting each other from left to right, but the black shadow suddenly disappeared from sight, and a scream came from behind them. The bat monster had a strange and eerie body, and silently cut the throat of the maid who handed Xuanhe clothes, causing blood to gush out and splatter all over the ground. Everyone's faces changed greatly. Jiang Hanyan was also startled with a cold expression. Her quick lightness skills and body movements were so fast that her eyes could only capture the shadows. She couldn't bear to think about it. The bat monster killed 2 more people. When he wanted to take action against the remaining maid guards and Lu Linger, Jiang Hanyan forced him back with a folding fan. Xuanhe and Qiuyun also gathered around, and the 3 of them surrounded the bat monster in the middle. The bat monster scanned the 3 of them in a circle and fixed itself in front of Jiang Hanyan. The pair of green eyes on the mask were fixed on Lu Linger behind Jiang Hanyan. Jiang Hanyan and Lu Linger suddenly realized his purpose. At that moment, the bat monster flipped his hand and suddenly found a handful of white powder. Jiang Hanyan's face changed and he couldn't speak in time, but he had already sprinkled it on the 3 people surrounding him, Qiuyun, Xuanhe, and Jiang Hanyan. Jiang Hanyan covered her face with a fan and held her breath. Qiuyun and Xuanhe were caught off guard and inhaled the powder, causing their bodies to soften and their eyes to faint. The bat monster took advantage of this gap and flew towards Lu Linger. The maid next to her stepped forward to stop the strange person, but in just a few moves, she was cut in the throat and fell to the ground to breathe, just like the previous 3. The strange man's steel claws also flew out at this moment, directly taking Lu Linger's life. Lu Linger instinctively retreated, tripped under her feet, and fell backwards, unable to escape. Xuanhe anxiously said, "Sister." Chapter 10. Looking back, encountering a beauty, moving steps and dancing gracefully. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But with a leap of Jiang Hanyan's lightness skill, he grabbed the rope of the flying claw and flew it towards the monster with his backhand. He then turned around and hugged Lu Linger's waist, taking her further away. With 2 bangs, the flying claws brushed against the monster and embedded it in the rockery stone. Lu Linger's mask also fell to the ground. 4 eyes facing each other. Lu Linger's eyes reflected Jiang Hanyan's shocked expression. This was also the second time in Jiang Hanyan's life that her mind went blank, the first time she heard of her father's death. This face she may never forget it in her lifetime. But the instinct of living on the edge of the knife for many years quickly brought her back to her senses. She spread out the fan to cover Lu Linger's face, let her hold it, and then turned to look at the bat monster. The bat monster saw the steel claws embedded in the stone and knew that Jiang Hanyan was not easy to deal with. He stepped on the ground and flew into the night. Jiang Hanyan was supposed to pursue, but she gave up when she saw Qiu Yun, whose face was half black and half kneeling on the ground. The frost grass on the side was also poisoned. Next to her came Lu Linger's voice, "Here are 2 Tianshan Ningxin pills. Let's take them for both of them." Jiang Hanyan looked at her, and Lu Linger covered half of her face with a fan, revealing a face that was not inferior to Shuanghe's, but her eyes avoided Jiang Hanyan. Jiang Hanyan instinctively averted her gaze, took the Ningxin pill, and gave it to Qiu Yun and the others to take. Seeing that their faces had improved slightly, Jiang Hanyan stood up and looked around the 4 corpses covered in blood on the ground, with a serious expression on her face. When she saw the golden mask falling on the ground, she went over and picked it up, returning it to Lu Linger. On the contrary, Lu Linger, who was also contemplating the body, was taken aback. Returning to her senses, Lu Linger subtly took the mask and turned around to put it on. Then she and Jiang Hanyan remained silent together, unsure of what to say for a moment. Unfortunately, at this moment, a commotion came from inside the building, with a scream piercing through the sky. Not long after, I saw Tao Yan running towards me with a pale face. I saw 4 corpses and Shuanghe and Qiuyun, who were cross-legged to regulate their breathing, were once again frightened. Then, I trembled and said, "Old lady, there's been a death." Moyue. Lu Linger's face had turned pale, and she quickly ran into the building holding up her skirt. The building has become a mess, and the guests on the 2nd floor are running down from above, shouting the words, "Vampire Demon," in their mouths. She quickly cleared the crowd and ran towards Mou's room on the 2nd floor. When she arrived at the door, it opened, but the situation inside made her body half cold. A good girl, dressed in white, lying in a pool of blood, with blood scattered throughout the room. There is also a ghostly red spell on the walls of the room, with 16 large red characters written next to it. Bats are deadly, and no one can avoid them. The Vampire King, reborn from the bloodshed. Jiang Hanyan arrived with the same surprised expression, but she was a bit more calm than others. Seeing the girl in the white clothes still breathing a little, she immediately grabbed a trembling servant beside her and said, Go to the Jiang mansion in Shibai Lane and invite Miss Yuli." The servant had not yet regained his senses and was carried down the 2nd floor by Jiang Hanyan. With a push from Jiang Hanyan, he immediately rushed out with a stirring spirit. Muxiangfang was in chaos, and Jiang Hanyan blocked the entrance, displaying the plaque of the Imperial Censorate and shouting loudly, "In the event of human death, no one can leave until the government arrives. Let me stay in place." Most of the people here are descendants of official families, and they are used to acting recklessly. Someone immediately pointed at Jiang Hanyan's nose and said, "What kind of thing are you?" "My father is the Crown Prince Zhanshe, and there are dead here. Let me leave." Jiang Hanyan's eyes sank as she raised her hand and pressed down on the person's hand. With a slap in the back, she let out a loud bang, silencing the crowd in the building. She only heard her say, "Human life is greater than heaven." Not to mention Crown Prince Zhanshe, even His Majesty the Emperor cannot ignore the law. I, Jiang Hanyan, carry the court's plaque and must implement the court's laws. The crowd began to discuss Jiang Hanyan's name, and she saw the carefree Li Hongyan. Regardless of whether he deliberately hid in the corner or not, she went forward and pulled him out. "Prince Yu, as a royal son, you should contribute to the law of the Ming dynasty. Could you please help me guard this door? If anyone dares to go out, please ask the Iron Guard to send him to the Yamen prison to enjoy himself." Li Hongyan didn't say a word and looked at Jiang Hanyan in shock. Unexpectedly, after Jiang Hanyan finished speaking, he went straight upstairs. Li Hongyan looked at her back with a suppressed expression on his face, but he could only force a smile under the gaze of his friends who were eating, drinking, and playing. I ordered someone to guard the door and cursed inwardly. "Jiang Hanyan, you are so cruel. Jiang Hanyan returned to Mou's door with a frosty expression on her face. Lu Linger leaned against the door with a headache, and the doctor in the building was already giving emergency treatment to Mou. Although Jiang Hanyan couldn't bear Lu Linger's fatigue, he still spoke out, "Boss Lu." Lu Linger raised her hand to stop Jiang Hanyan from speaking. "Captain Jiang, there's no need to say more. Wait for Mou. I will ask you clearly. Now let me be quiet." Jiang Hanyan glanced at her and didn't say anything more. Yuli also arrived shortly. When she went upstairs, Li Hongyan followed behind her, who was supposed to be guarding the door. Li Hongyan smiled foolishly at Yuli, who knew his thoughts, but Yuli never glanced at him. Yuli walked up to Jiang Hanyan and said, "Mississippi. Save people first." Yuli went into the house and together with the doctor from Muxiangfang, rescued Moyue. Jiang Hanyan blocked Li Hongyan outside the door. Lu Linger glanced at them and then walked aside to wait. She stood in front of the railing on the second floor, watching the people gathered on the first floor. In a moment, Jiang Hanyan also stood next to her. The people on the first floor were whispering, while the lights of Muxiangfang remained intoxicated. Jiang Hanyan looked at Muxiangfang and squinted. "The fifth human life is here." "No, there are more than 5 lives." Lu Linger looked at Jiang Hanyan. "And 4 of her innocent subordinates who suffered." Jiang Hanyan looked into Lu Linger's eyes and felt the danger hidden deep in her beauty. The eyes of Lu Linger, who was truly angry, were very similar to those of Shuanghe, but they were even colder than Shuanghe's. Jiang Hanyan looked at her silently. "Ah, Xian, beggar Shao Lu, Minister of Personnel Chang Zigui, Minister of Justice Shen Qiyuan, and the 4 subordinates of Lu Linger, if we add Mou, it will cost 9 lives. Be sure to catch the killer before the next victim appears. Mou may be the breakthrough point. Waiting is long." During this time, Shuanghe and Qiuyuan were quietly brought into the room by Lu Linger's command to regulate their breath. Shao Jin had already arrived with the people from the Imperial Censorate and interrogated the people in Muxiangfang one by one. But the interrogation did not go smoothly. Shao Jin had to navigate among people from all backgrounds, and there were hardships that he could not express. Jiang Hanyan looked down at the still arrogant and domineering playboys below, and sighed lightly as if she had never heard of them before going down to help Shao Jin interrogate. Lu Linger glanced at the first female catcher as if unintentionally, her complex emotions blocking behind the mask, and Jiang Hanyan did not notice. Until dawn breaks. Yuli just came out of the room and saw the back of Jiang Hanyan and Lu Linger standing together. She frowned slightly, and before she could speak, Jiang Hanyan had already noticed her. She immediately approached and asked, "Yuli, how are you?" At the same time, Lu Linger also stared at Yuli closely. Yuli glanced at the two of them and said, "My life is temporarily saved, but I have lost too much blood and am still in a coma. I don't know when I can wake up, and there may be a risk of death at any time." Jiang Hanyan and Lu Linger's emotions also became heavy. Lu Linger said to Yuli, "I've heard that Yuli has superb medical skills in resurrection, so Mou asked her to do so." Yuli looked at Lu Linger's mask and eyes. After a while, with a gentle she exchanged eyes with Jiang Hanyan and went to do her own job. Jiang Hanyan's gaze fell on Lu Linger, who also understood that interrogation was inevitable. She calmly said, "How do you want to interrogate me, Muxiangfang?" Jiang Hanyan lifted her eyes downwards and said, "Of course, starting from Mr. Lu."